Okay.
And next up, we've got Hamish. Hamish joining us from Auckland. Is it still raining up in Auckland, Hamish?
No, the sun's come
Oh,
out. It's
yeah,
it's been a really
I
nice
can see
day
the
though.
sunshine. It's really sunny in here, although it doesn't look like that in my background. But yeah, I mean, this I'm really enjoying this conference because all of those different sessions are sort of coming together. And we had Lynn talk a little about Canvas apps and AK talk a little about portals. And now you're going to come in and tell us, about best practices. Like, I know you're an expert in sort of dealing with customers. A lot of the customers have, high regards towards you, and they say, oh, yeah, Hamish saved our business. So I'm really keen to see what's your secret sauce in there to actually listen to what the customers want and then to give them the best solution moving forward. So over to you, Hamish.
Cool, thanks, Rami. Thank you for the nice introduction. Always good to have favourable things said about you. Yeah, so as Rami said, I have got a bit of I guess my presentation's a bit different today in that it's very much non-technical. And it's actually, well, I'll share my screen, but we've just got a process for, I guess, in terms of understanding the customer, but also about, it's basically about gathering requirements for bespoke Power Platform solutions. And so what I guess why I kind of think this is a good topic and why I've kind of put together a bit of a framework around this is that for people like myself and probably Rami as well and others who've come from like a Dynamics 365 background, if you're a consultant or a business analyst or you're kind of working in that space, when you're trying to define a solution through Dynamics, it could you'd be doing the sales module, the case management module, field service, whatever. But I guess the processes and the solutions behind those are all generically the same. It's kind of just rinse and repeat. You do the, overall the same thing for the for different customers. But kind of ever since the Power Platforms come out, I guess the work we do now is becoming a lot more bespoke. It's not just a sales solution or just a customer management solution. It's completely anything custom, right? And so we've got to get used to rather than I guess we already understand how a case management system works or a sales system works, but we need to now understand these systems that we have no idea about, and then also design solutions for them. And so I've found it kind of a little bit tricky transversing across that and other consultants as well in terms of where do we get started with gathering these requirements? How do we go about it? How do we communicate it back to the customer? How do we make sure that we are aligned with the customer as well? And I think it's super important. And so what I've got to show you today is I'm calling it a framework, but about basically a series of exercises I go through with clients when we're defining requirements. And the idea is that we're all working together and we're all aligned on the I guess the same solution and the same problem. So, and going with kind of Rami's theme around I guess doing things a little bit differently and working in different manners, and I guess the impacts of COVID as well. I've in terms of doing workshops and gathering requirements, it's gone very much from being in an office and a meeting room with a whiteboard and writing down notes and drawing diagrams on a whiteboard to doing everything virtually. And so what I've got here showing to you at the moment is a program called Miro. It's basically an online digital whiteboard. And there are heaps of other different applications like this. This is probably one of the most popular ones. And I've actually recently moved from Mural, which is another digital whiteboard, to this one, just because I find it a lot easier to use. And it's got some pretty neat features. So we're taking you through that today, and what I've done is my intro slides are just pasted in on this whiteboard, and I'll scan through them all. So just to introduce myself to those who don't know me, I see quite a few names in the call that I don't recognise. So my name is Hamish Sheild, and I've been involved in the Dynamics 365 for the last 12 years or so. I'm currently a Microsoft MVP for business applications, and I have my own little consultancy company called App Rising, where our mission is to inspire and enable anyone to create their own digital innovative solutions. And so it's kind of things like I'm showing you today that we do in our consultancy, more around, I guess, enabling people to build their own solutions rather than doing the building for them. Not to say that I don't like getting hands-on with a Canvas app or two. Right, so what I'm going to show you is a thing called the solution mapping framework. And so what you're going to see today from this kind of slide onwards is exactly kind of what I go through with clients. And we have, I guess, the whiteboards all set up with, I guess, instructions and exercises as we go. So if I'll just zoom out for you and show you kind of, this is the whole workshop here. So we've got a whole bunch of different exercises that we work through as a team, and completely all virtual. And so what I do is give my clients a login to this board, and everyone, you'll see people's little mouse moving around with their names against it. So everyone's interacting on this board, and so which kind of makes it quite fun and I guess a more interactive experience than just sitting in a room where someone's asking questions and someone's writing down notes. So in terms of the framework itself, so the way that it works is, as a group, we work together to define this Power Platform solution. And what I've got here is a very structured step-by-step process, which basically guides us through looking at the problem from a very high level, and then we're drilling right down to the detail to get to a point where we've got requirements written as user stories, and we've got these user stories are used to start building the solution or designing the solution from. And the whole idea of this is that I'm trying to make it, I guess, visual as well. So I've called it a solution mapping framework, where we actually kind of map it out. It is all very visual. And the idea being that we need to get everyone on the same page. So the project team, from the project manager to the developers to the business analysts, functional consultants, all the way through to the stakeholders who, the end users, the project sponsor, everyone's got to be on the same page. And I don't know about you, but I've always found it historically quite hard to, you do these workshops, you write it up in a big document, it's about 100 pages long, and you give the customer the functional requirements document to read and approve, and they typically skim through it and say, yeah, give it a tick. But they typically won't understand it or what they're getting, and it's not until you kind of get further into the project, in terms of, say, UAT, for example, and actually getting hands-on with the product, that they really understand what they're getting. And so what I'm trying to do with this framework is tackle some of those challenges up front. So as we go, everyone's on board on the same page. So as I said, this goes through a series of exercises. There's 4 of them. The first one is called expert interview. So it's around just exploring the problem space. What are we trying to solve, and interviewing the people who are involved with this problem. We then kind of look at a thing called a journey map. So kind of starting to map this out visually, and looking at what is the kind of current state process, what are the people doing, what are they interacting with, what are their pain points, and then finally, what are those opportunities can we, say, use the Power Platform to overcome some of those pain points and give them a good solution. And so as we go, we suddenly get kind of more granular into this. So the third exercise is around putting together a kind of a swim lane business process diagram, and defining what the future state will be, and looking at what people are involved and what systems will we be using, what components of the Power Platform will we be using. And the fourth exercise is around getting this all written down as a backlog, user stories and requirements, and these will be, I guess, the action steps you take to start building out this solution on the Power Platform. Right, so the first thing we need to do is, typically, you would, you could be a consultant externally with a client. You could be a business analyst working internally in a business. You could just be a maker of the Power Apps or maker of Power App solutions. But you've always somehow have a problem to solve, and you've got to work with the people who are using it to come up with the solution. So you typically often have some sort of problem summary that you've talked to the users about in terms of what they're trying to solve. And so in this scenario, I've got a fictional client who is in the construction industry, and these guys install piles as the foundations for buildings, and they've got a pretty rigorous QA check that they've got to go through. So they've got to tick off a checklist and meet all these criteria as part of the work they're doing. And so in terms of the problem around this is that their quality assurance process is paper-based. It's very manual, extremely time-consuming. There's a lot of duplication of work, and with all that comes a high risk of human error, resulting in sometimes non-compliance, and non-compliance can sometimes mean fines or fees, which are pretty hefty in the construction industry. And so what this this client wants out of this is, in terms of their desired outcomes, is to be more efficient, reducing the duplication of work, reducing risk in terms of the losing paper documents and that sort of thing, and overall just giving their customer a better experience. So some of the feedback this client has had is that customers complain about why does it take so long for them to get their documentation after the installation has been done. And so this is a pretty typical scenario of taking a paper process and putting it into a digital solution. It's a pretty typical scenario for the Power Platform, but it's not one where it's not a cookie cutter solution, right, where we've pre-done this before. We're just going to dive into what are the details, how does this company actually go about doing this at the moment. And so that brings us to the first exercise around really finding out from the people who work in this space, what are the problems they're facing, and how can we help them. So this is an exercise called expert interviews. And so what happens is you'll have people on a workshop, and everyone's on the call, and me as the workshop facilitator will then basically interview these people and ask them questions. And so it'd be one person being interviewed at a time for around five minutes. And while that person's been interviewed, everyone else takes notes. And we're taking notes in a certain style and format, and we're doing it in what we call how might we format. And the reason we're doing this is, instead of just writing random notes, we're putting it into the structure so that I guess we have kind of certain outcomes. And so the way we do this kind of how might we is that the how is basically, he's putting a positive spin on it, right? Assuming there is a solution to this problem, so it kind of does give us a bit of confidence. The might suggests that there are it might mean there's a huge number of ideas out there, and no idea is right or wrong at this stage. And the we suggests that we're doing this as a group, we're doing it as a team. It's not just one person trying to solve the problem. A team of people solving a problem is definitely a better way to go about it. So let's just look at some examples about, I guess, what we mean by a how might we statement. And so, how might we, for example, here is improve our customers' lives, or how might we reduce the worry about diseases and hygiene. So kind of quite generic. But what the attendees of this workshop would do is we would give them, as we're going through the interviews one by one, everyone has a pile of post-it notes, and they just write down like crazy as many how might we's as possible. And then once that's done, it's quite often quite good to group those notes, or those how might we's, into different categories. And here, I guess, some example categories. It doesn't really matter what you choose, it's kind of what's really relevant to your project. So some of the categories that we've got here are how do we, and this is kind of about focusing on your customers, but how do we raise above our competition? How do we reduce stuff for our customers? How do we eliminate things for our customers? How do we create new things for our customers? And so some of these examples are things like, you'll be in the interview and the person will say, our customers complain to us all the time about our documents not being delivered all time, or they're 3 to 4 months late type thing. And so instead of writing that as your note, you'd write it as how might we deliver the QA documents to the customer faster. So it's in a lot more positive light. It's open up for solutions and open up for ideas. And that kind of helps us move forward in our requirements gathering. Okay, so after this exercise, you'll end up with, this is only, I've only got a few post-it notes here, but when you've got a group of, say, 6 to 8 people in the workshop, this whole thing we completely crowded with post-it notes, and it's pretty hard to see the wood for the trees in terms of like what do we actually focus on. And so what the next part of this exercise is, as people vote on the ones they think that are the most important challenges to overcome for the customer. And what we do is we put a little timer on, and everyone has some little dots, and they'll just pick up a dot and they'll copy it and they'll go put it against the post-it note they think is the one that is the most important. And what you end up with at the end of that kind of voting session is a whole bunch of post-it notes around, little dots around post-it notes, like a bit of a heat map, and you then pull out the ones that people think are the most critical to overcome, and they kind of inform what you're going to focus on as part of your solutions. So as we scroll through to the next exercise, it's around, starting to visualize this process, and we're looking now at the current state through what we call a journey map. So probably a lot of you will be maybe familiar with customer journey maps, and they come in different kind of flavors. And this is the one that I quite like. But what typically happens is you've had some discussions with the customer. We've written down all these notes about the problem area, and what I typically do as a consultant leading these workshops is I would pre-fill in as much of this customer journey as possible before the workshop, and then work with the team to fill in the rest. And so the way that this works is that you have some sort of a process or a journey and a persona, and you may have multiple of these kind of per project, depending on how big the project is. And what we do is you first start off by filling in, well, what are the high level phases or the steps this person goes through to complete this process. And so in terms of this example, to do the quality assurance documentation, they first of all create a checklist for a project. They generate the checklist items based on the design of the poles that have been installed. They create some documents and then review them, and they send them out. And so that kind of gives you a frame for how to fill this out. And then we come down through to the different rows, where the first one is actions. So what actions is the user performing as they go through this process? And we dot them all down here. What is the user interacting with? So what tools are they currently using? What people are they working with? What other software or systems are they using? Even possibly what location they're doing these things in. So you write this all down as well, and so you end up kind of pre-filling in those kind of first 3 rows, and then during the workshop you talk through this with the client, and usually you talk through and you start madly putting down different post-it notes yourself, and so the client can see what you're doing, and they can correct you if you make a mistake. So everyone is still kind of staying on this kind of same page and have the same vision of everything. We then start documenting the pain points as well. So what are the pain points of doing these actions and interacting with these things? What are the pain points that come out of it? And then finally, we start looking at the opportunities. So what are our solutions? And so at this stage, I would then get everyone to get involved in this exercise again. And you'd set a timer and say, everyone go nuts and put down on here as many post-it notes for as many ideas as possible about what we can do to make this process better, based on all the information we've got here, based on those how might we questions we put together earlier on around the most critical things we need to solve. So you kind of you're building up on this solution as we go. And so if you're going to kind of take a look at this as an example, the actions are doing things like doing the design, creating a checklist, getting it reviewed. They've got Excel, PDF, they've got printers, they're in the office. Then they're kind of moving to on-site when they're generating, with the generation of the checklist, and that's handed over to the site crew. And through all of that, they've got many pain points around things being time-consuming, things get lost, it's all paper-based, takes ages to get back to the office, these sorts of things, right? And then, so from all that, we come up with some opportunities. And so like the previous example or the previous exercise, you end up with a whole bunch of sticky notes and opportunities of things to put into your solution. And so again, like how do you know where do you even start? And so essentially what you do is go through another voting exercise. People take the little red dot and put it next to their the post-it notes they think are the best opportunities to overcome the challenges in this problem. Now, one of the things when you're I guess doing a voting session like that on ideas, you really want to have a think about what sort of this thing we call a impact effort matrix, in terms of what are the things that are going to be the lowest effort but deliver the highest impact. Those are the things that you really want to focus on first. I mean, you definitely don't want to be focusing on things that are low effort, low impact, because it's not going to give the results. And so it's a very important thing when you're voting on your ideas to really think about what is going to give the most impact for the least amount of effort. So once that journey map exercise is done, we now and that was very much based on current state, what are the pain points. We're now going to look forward to the future and use those opportunities that we outlined. And so this is kind of where we start getting down into a kind of a business process diagram. And so that what I think is really key around this is having swim lanes, but having both people and systems in the same diagram. And this may not be like technically correct from a business analyst point of view, but this is kind of how I do it. And just trying to communicate it to the customer in a way that they can understand as well. And so the reason why it's really key to have people in there is you've got to think about, at the end of the day, you've got an end user and they're going to be using your application that you build. So usually you would start with a sort of process there. And so if we walk through this one, basically the design manager enters their details into a project. And so what are they going to be entering it into? They're entering it into a Power App, and then that Power App is going to save it into Database. So we're thinking about all the systems are kind of all the kind of Power Platform components we're going to start building into the solution. And so your solution is starting to kind of take shape through here while aligning it with your business process. And so you can see here we've got Power Apps, Power Automate doing a few things. I'm going to have there'll be an AI builder component at some stage, but it's a pretty kind of standard business process flow diagram, and this is kind of it's an example. This is the first part of it, and that would continue on. So our solution is starting to take place, and you may have multiple of these business processes, as I say, depending how big the solution is. For this one here in particular, we can kind of get away with one process. So once you've kind of defined that process here, and I guess what I forgot to mention is that you wouldn't do this here in a workshop. You would go away as the business analyst or consultant. You'd go away and put this together based on the journey map and what the outcomes were from that, and you'd put together your design. Then you'd review this with the customer and make sure everything was all good. And so what I really like about Muro as a platform is it's really easy to do things like adjust things on the fly while you're talking to the customer. And so I can move things out. I thought that would move, but you can make the thing bigger, move things around. I'm not making it look that simple at all, actually, but it is really, once you get into the groove of it, it's really easy to kind of move things around. You can change things on the fly with the customer, so they can kind of see in real time what you're doing, and then it kind of just cuts down a lot of documentation, right? You don't have to go away and document all this again. You've done it in real time with the customer, which I quite like. I'm not a big fan of documenting heaps of stuff. Right, so once you've got this business process put together, you've kind of got a high level view of what the solution's starting to look like. What are the Power Platform components we're putting together? At this stage, you may also want to do things like start to mock up some screenshots and stuff. And again, this is why I like a digital tool like this, is you can start pasting screenshots onto this when this whiteboard is infinite in terms of what you can do with it and size. And so you can start pasting screenshots to help also bring it to life for your customer as well. Right, so let's kind of get into the details. We need to kind of put together our backlog in terms of what what are the people who are going to build the solution, what are they going to build, people are testing it, what are they going to test. And so this comes in the form of a backlog and user stories. And so I'm just going to assume that people know what a user story is, what a backlog is. Apologies to those who don't. If you want to kind of learn more about putting together backlogs, that sort of thing, there's a guy called Danny Cahill who does a really good blog series on how to kind of structure your requirements and document them using Azure DevOps. What I'm going to do though today is kind of talk about how you kind of get from our kind of high level diagrams into a backlog. And so usually a backlog is structured as such where you've got, I guess, epics, features, and then user stories below. So user stories are kind of describe the individual little tasks that the user will do. And so the way that I think about structuring this backlog is that an epic is basically a business process. So when we look at our diagrams here, this big square here is one business process. I would label that as an epic in our backlog. Then each epic has, I guess, features, which are about, I guess, things that you do with your application within the epic. And I would classify those things as, say, an opportunity from the journey map, or maybe a group of opportunities would make up a feature. And so how we go about mapping this out is I've got a couple of, we're going to use Azure DevOps as the backlog management tool. So take a couple of these icons and just paste them onto the maps where they're relevant. So you can have a visual idea of what these epics and features are covering. So I've got a couple of examples here, and I'm going to take this one. This is our epic, and this is I've called it the Pile Installation Quality Assurance epic, which pretty much covers the whole app. And I'm just going to go and paste it over here against my process. So I now know that this epic relates to this process. So your clients now have kind of like a visual representation of where your epics are. I'll kind of come back to why that's important in a bit. And then with the feature, we're going to take that and we see that features map through to opportunities from the journey map. And so I've got a feature here which kind of covers both of these opportunities here around having an app to hold the checklist information all in one place, and then auto-generating the checklist. So I've got a feature called Create a Project Checklist, and then I'll have a whole bunch of user stories below it. Another example is we may have another feature called, I'm going to update this one, give it a name, notifications. So that's a feature we're going to have as part of our app, and that goes against this this card here. So you're going to start to build together a visual picture of what are the things you're going to build as epics and features. So let's go back to our, so once you kind of map those kind of high level components of the solution out, it's then a good idea to go into Azure DevOps and start documenting it. And so I'm not going to go into any details about how you document those, but that's why I kind of refer to Danny Cahill's stuff. He's got a very good blog on how to go through that. The next thing is you want to do is then define what are those user stories. So user stories are, these are the I guess the items that describe what the user is going to do with the application, and then the acceptance criteria for what is being built. And so basically I see a user story as mapping to a single step in the system swim lanes of the business process diagram. And so again, we do the same sort of thing to kind of help visualize this. I'm going to copy, I've got a few example user stories here, and I'm going to take them back across to my business process map. And and we're going to kind of focus in on, the things that you're really going to build are the things down here in terms of the Power Apps things you're building, the Power Automate things you're building. So I'm going to copy my little widgets here, and I've already kind of pre-done these user stories in Azure DevOps. What I'm going to do, I want to bring them up to here, and I might just say, let's make that top level. And so now I'm going to start to build, a map up of, I'll put that on there, and I'll put this one on here. And so now you're starting to assign user stories to different parts and components of the business process flow. So let's go back to where we were over here. We've now taken these user stories and kind of identify what those user stories are. And now we need to go through and actually start documenting. So we're going to get down to a bit more detail in terms of what happens. And so for I'll probably take you through a bit more detail of the user stories in a bit. But once you've written those user stories, what we want to do is then come through and link those user stories back to this map. So you then have, because you've got two disparate systems at the moment, right? You've got this nice whiteboard with visual diagrams, and then you've got Azure DevOps as holding user stories. So what I like to do is go into your user story in Azure DevOps, and this title is usually a link, copy that link, and then go and update your little tags with the link itself. And so if I show you an example of where I've done one earlier, this one here, you can see it as it's a blue link. I click on it, and it's going to take me through to user story 253. So I'll open up that. And here is my documented user story with my description and acceptance criteria, and you have notes and comments and all sorts of things here. Now, this may kind of seem like a lot of work in terms of I'm copying and pasting things in links from different systems to the other, but what I've found in terms of how this works is that when you're communicating with a customer and you've got you've got a backlog of items in Azure DevOps, and you're trying to work with the customer through all these things, and they don't know what they relate to or how they kind of fit into the wider picture. It's really hard just looking at a list of stuff. I mean, it's like looking at a spreadsheet. So when you're working with a client, you may be, say, reviewing backlogs, or you're reviewing design decisions or requirement decisions based on requirements. Let me go back to more. Yeah. It's a lot easier to kind of look at it all from the point of view of a whiteboard. And so if you say, take a look at this, and a customer wants to talk about a certain user story at a certain point in the process, we can come into the whiteboard here, find it very easily, discuss how this is all working, and then click through to the details of the user story if you wanted to. I've found this incredibly useful, and for getting complete clarity on where things are happening in the solution. And I've had examples before where someone's talking about a user story about doing something here when actually the developer is talking about this user story here, and they're completely talking across each other and not making any sense. So this is a really good way to document your requirements and get the customer to sign off and agree on them. But then as you go through the project and you're working on different things and you're clarifying different things, you'll come back again to this tool time and time again. And I just find it super, super powerful and worth that kind of extra work of tagging everything with all these links. And so that really does kind of bring us back to the end of the process. So what we've done is, if I zoom right out, is I always found it really hard to go, okay, I've got a problem that we need to solve, and we know you've got to get to some user stories and a big backlog and a list of things to build at the end, but how do you get from start to finish? And I think this is a kind of good process for starting very high level, and then you just kind of break it down chunk by chunk by chunk until you get down to the bottom level. So I hope people find this useful. If you're interested, I'm happy to kind of give this template away. If you want to use this with and within your company with your clients or whatever, to reach out. But I think we may have a couple of minutes for some questions if anyone's got any. All right, so there's some in the chat there. Feel free to, Sarah, you got your hand up. You feel free to come off mute and ask if you like.
Yeah, great presentation, Hamish. I have got a couple of questions. In your, when you categorise the HMW into the swim lanes, and you had those 4 headings, are those standard headings, or were they specific to that project?
No, those are pretty generic standard ones, but you could, if you wanted to, make them more specific depending on what you're trying to focus on. But those are quite generic in terms of if you're trying to build it's very customer focused, but if you're trying to build a product or something to help your customers, then that's I think if you didn't know what kind of headings to use, those would be quite good, just generic ones. They always seem to kind of work out quite well.
Yeah, because when I was reading them, I was thinking, well, what about the impact on, they were customer focused, but what about the impact on the internal customers, like the actual staff who are doing the process? And the other question, so hopefully I'm not taking up anyone else's time, but hopefully the other question was, in your voting session where you had your effort and impact matrix, that effort, is that development effort? Or what sort of effort?
Yeah. Well, effort overall, like into, because it's I guess it's development effort, and I guess you can scale it out, right? But there's, I guess in terms of putting together a product, there's development effort, there's change management, there's training, there's, I guess, think about the effort over the entire project of doing that. So it could be something that was maybe super easy to develop, but it's going to take a huge amount of change management to roll it out to people. And so I would, if it includes everything, I think it's quite why it's left as effort and quite generic, because there's a lot of factors that can sway how much effort goes into something for a project. Yeah.
Great, thanks.
Cool. And Sami?
Yeah, hi Hamish, thank you for this nice presentation. I have a quick question. Like currently I'm working for a customer and just finding difficulties for mapping that requirement into that like the features which we wanted to implement in the Power Apps. So what is the best like options to like mapping that business requirement into the Power Apps? Like, do you have any like a step-by-step guide to just create the diagram and then start for the development and just work in the Azure DevOps? So do you have any insight on that?
Yeah, that's super hard. I mean, I guess, like
I got it. It's like it's a big question. Just I just wanted to in short, like how we can just make so that process in smooth.
Yeah, no, I understand what you mean, and that's a common kind of question you get, right? In terms of how do you know? I mean, you've got the process diagram, but how do you know when you get into the systems, which systems and bits or components of the Power Platform are appropriate for each thing, right? And I mean, I know it, I guess, based on experience, right? And that's where maybe you may want to get some external consultants in, and you can say, hey, you can draw your business process flow and go, okay, this is what I want the app, the thing to do, and maybe get someone, an expert, in to say, hey, what are the preferred components should we use? I mean, the other way you can go about it is just experiment. Like go and you can say, I need to generate a checklist of items. Can I do it with Power Automate? And spend half an hour playing around. Oh yeah, actually I think I can do this. This is possible. And then that's basically how I've learned over the years, right? It's you just trial and error as well. I mean, I know it's time consuming, but that you consume your own time and learn about all this, or you get some external help in, I think is don't know if that answers your question.
Yes, Hamish, thanks. Yep, I got it. Thanks.
Very good questions and very good presentation, Hamish. It's really funny, like all of us in that consultancy space are going through a similar phase. And I've seen Miro being used quite a lot recently. And as you said, it's like the flavor of the month. So there's a few that were before that we used, and now they're sort of dying off, and then Miro is taking over. But yeah, my question is like similar to what Sumit was asking is, how can you make sure you've got the right audience in sort of this whole experience that you're taking them through? And also, like quite often you would know what it's like and you would visualize it and you would design it, document it, and deliver it, and they go, oh, that's not what we had in mind. So how can you make sure that this doesn't happen, that they've got like assurance that's the right thing?
Yeah, for sure. So it's in terms of the audience, like who to bring to the workshop. I didn't actually cover much on that, but you want to have a range of people, right? So you want to have in there, you actually want it, and I know this gets expensive, but you want to have the developers in there who are going to be developing this, so they start learning about it, because I don't know if how it works in other organizations, but I've seen far too often where the developer just gets handed the requirements, but they've had none of the upfront experience. So you want the developers, I mean, you want obviously the end users, so don't have a bunch of managers in there who are defining the requirements, have the people who will actually be using the app in the end. That's super key as well. So I think it's about, you need to have a very broad range of people in there. And I think that's really key. And if you do it in I guess with Miro and do it in a very structured format where, I have kind of rules around, you're not actually allowed to talk in this workshop unless you've been, I guess, asked to speak. Everything is written down on post-it notes, and that gives everyone the chance to have their say. And you don't have that one person just hammering away and overriding everything, right? So, and that's why you have the voting as well. The voting helps people have their say too on narrowing down what the solution will be, not just one person going, hey, this is the solution. like it or lump it type thing.
Yeah.
So I hope that helps.
That's amazing. It's great insight and great techniques as well to be a bit sort of draconian about, hey, what you can do and what you can do, and that obviously has its own sort of benefits so that you can control the conversation. Great, thank you very much, Hamish. Thank you for taking some time off your Saturday and joining us all the way from Auckland. Hopefully you can enjoy the rest of the weather.